I knew something was off when the VP said nothing's final in that voice. You know the one. Tight smile, eyes doing math behind the glasses. He said it right after a vendor sync got mysteriously rescheduled for the third time, but this time it had 5 lawyers CC'd and a new Zoom password. I wasn't supposed to be in that loop, but they forgot my name still routes legacy ops invites. Rookie mistake? That's what happens when the new regime thinks folders are just for decoration and contract tabs are a form of personality disorder. I've been in operations and deal prep for 15 years. I'm the woman they send when a 300-900 number rollout needs to not implode on launch day because someone forgot to click enable multi-zone. I don't make speeches. I write the checklist the speech depends on. I'm not flashy. My folders are. Yellow tabs for compensation, green for benefits, red for landmine clauses. Clause 19B is red. Always has been. I reviewed it again the night before Caitlin's big debut. Just a glance, just to make sure the signatures were still wet, the dates aligned, and my continuity memo was logged in the offsite archive, time-stamped and mirrored to the escrow server in Zurich, just in case. Because here's what they never notice. While they're posing for earnings calls and leaking merger rumors to Forbes under anonymous sources close to the deal, someone has to keep the tracks clean. That someone was me. Every supply contract cross-synced, every bonus trigger documented, every LOI calendar invite quietly backed up in triplicate. I even color-coded my resignation letter drafts. Did I expect to need them? No. But I've seen enough executive blunders to know hoping for foresight is like betting on a raccoon to respect trash can lids. The most obvious sign was the HRIS timestamp rollback. They thought I wouldn't notice the logs being trimmed on the event tracker. But I logged the logs. I'm that kind of fun. When they stripped access from Marcy in procurement for streamlining, she cried. I upgraded her folder permissions and told her to keep printing physical copies. She called me paranoid. I called it record keeping. Then I labeled the external hard drive. Contingency, Q4 unconfirmed. If you've made it this far, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. 97% of people listen without subscribing. And yeah, it's just a button, but it means a hell of a lot to the team putting these stories together. You won't want to miss what comes next. Anyway, Caitlin. Fresh from LinkedIn with a power blazer and a minor in condescension. I saw her practicing her termination empathy face in the glass reflection of the elevator 2 days before the big moment. I almost laughed. Almost. But I was too busy checking if the PDF date field on my original contract had been tampered with. It hadn't. Digital watermark held. Timestamp matched the PDF hash in the compliance archive. Uneditable. That's the thing with paper. It doesn't care how important your title is. It doesn't flinch when your tone gets sharp or when you say words like redundant and streamline with fake gravity. It just sits there, waiting. My entire career was a quiet bet that someday someone would pull the wrong lever at the wrong time, and I wouldn't have to fight. I'd just have to hand them the receipt. Clause 19B was simple on paper. If I was terminated without cause during an active transaction window, the parachute deployed. Not a severance, not a handshake. A full vest, forward comp, bonus multiplier, and pre-negotiated indemnity all auto-triggered, but only if they fired me during the window. And guess who finally gave me a termination letter with effective upon receipt while the sale clock was already ticking? I labeled the folder. Activated. Then I exhaled. Not panic, not even smugness. Just a quiet, grounded certainty that I had been waiting my entire career for someone like Caitlin to hand me that exact envelope. Caitlin strutted in like a PowerPoint with teeth, new blazer, fresh curls, one of those confident smirks HR picks up from YouTube leadership seminars. She didn't knock, just stepped into my office like she was already halfway through a TED Talk. Behind her, the cardboard box. No logo. Just dead brown cardboard, the kind you use when you don't want to commit to dignity or permanence. She placed it down like a verdict, spine stiff, clearly rehearsed. I could smell the nerves under her grapefruit perfume. She cleared her throat. Per company policy, this is your final day. You'll receive a formal termination letter via email shortly. And I cut her off, calm, clinical. Is it already sent? She blinked. Excuse me? The termination letter, I need the exact timestamp and the PDF copy, please. She hesitated. Rookie error. If you're going to deliver a corporate execution, don't fumble the guillotine blade. She clicked around on her tablet and said, It's effective upon receipt. Said it like it was final, like she'd dropped a grenade and was already walking away from the explosion. Poor thing had no idea the pin was still in my hand. I nodded once, slowly. You might want to check Clause 19B in my contract before you pack anything. Her hand froze mid-scroll. She blinked again. Clause? Clause 19 Bravo, I said flatly. You'll find it under Special Conditions, Employment Termination Triggers during Active Transaction Windows. That's when I saw it. The first crack in her training. Her eyes darted left, like she was trying to remember who trained her, who approved the script. I leaned back in my chair, steepled my fingers, and watched the slow realization crawl up her spine. HR doesn't read contracts. They read playbooks. Mine wasn't in hers. Her hand trembled just slightly over the mouse. Just enough for me to know she understood there was something beneath the surface she hadn't been briefed on. Something sharp. I didn't push. I didn't need to. My job was never to shout. It was to log, label, and file. I stood, calm and unhurried, and pulled my badge from its clip, placed it gently on the desk next to the untouched box. Then I turned to my laptop, opened Outlook, and began a new email. To counsel@firmname.com, sec.board@firmname.com. Subject: Notice of termination, effective attachments, termination odd letter.pdf, calendar log loy meeting 9 a.m. PDF body: Per attached notice received at 10:03 a.m., my termination is effective immediately. As per Clause 19B of my employment agreement, this constitutes a trigger event during an active transaction window. I have notified escrow, counsel, and buyer's legal per agreed-upon protocols. I clicked send. No drama, no commentary, just record-keeping. Caitlin finally spoke, voice brittle. You're copying the board? Yes, I said. It's important they know the precise time the termination took effect, especially given the transaction is already under LOI. What transaction? I smiled, just barely. Oh, honey, if you don't know, you probably shouldn't be holding the box. She didn't reply, just stood there, one hand on the lid like she wanted to slam it shut and rewind the morning. But policy doesn't beat contracts. And 19B was more than a line of text. It was an unpulled lever waiting for arrogance to do its job. Outside, the sky was gray, fitting. I tucked my laptop into my bag, checked my phone, and saw the escrow officer had already replied with a one-word text. Received. By the time Caitlin finally sat down in my chair, probably to email legal in a panic, I was already in the elevator. Calm, steady, anger corked tight like a grenade in a glove box. I'd waited months for this exact sequence of incompetence. All I had to do now was let the paperwork detonate. The air in the parking lot had that fake-cooled corporate chill. Forced trees, beige mulch, the illusion of control. I didn't sit, just stood by my car, opened my folder app, and tapped the contact labeled escrow, priority line. 3 rings. Mrs. Garrett, the voice answered, crisp. You've triggered early. What's the event? Termination. No cause cited. Time of notice, 10:03 a.m. Received via HR representative Caitlin Devers. File name terminationletter.pdf. Clause 19B applies. My voice was glass smooth, like I'd practiced this, which I had more times than I'd admit. A pause. Then, do you confirm the window is currently active? I opened my calendar, scrolled to the 9 a.m. slot. The vendor integration LOI brief invite was right there, time-stamped, signed, and backstopped with buyer's counsel. I read the subject line into the phone. The LOI was reviewed this morning at 9:01 a.m. My termination occurred at 10:03, 1 hour into an open transaction window. Understood. Confirmed, she said. We'll flag the record and prepare receipt of documentation. Do you have counsel looped? In progress, I replied. Check your inbox in 60 seconds. I hung up and opened a fresh email. Not dramatic, not emotional, just meticulous. Attachments already prepped the night before, waiting in a draft folder I labeled, If Caitlin Actually Does It. To legal@escrowbank.com, lead.counsel@firmname.com, buyer.counsel@acquirersmith.com, cc, boardsec@firmname.com. Subject: Trigger event, Clause 19B, Key person termination attachments, termination out letter.pdf, comp schedule to Q4 signed .xlsx. Calendar invite LOI briefing 9 a.m. ICS board minutes annotated 1123. PDF body. Dear all, per clause 19b of my executed employment agreement, I am notifying relevant parties of my termination, without stated cause, effective immediately during an active transaction window. Please find attached the supporting documentation. Note: board minutes from November 23rd reference pending key person protections, reviewed, which included my designation. Regards, A. Garrett. I reread it once. No extra words, no heat, just the exact amount of rope they'd given me, and now I was handing it back, looped. The text from my attorney landed before the read receipts even came in. Windows open. 19B triggered. Prepare demand package. I closed my eyes for just a beat. Not to savor it, there's no joy in this kind of thing, just relief. Cold, earned relief. The kind you get when the escape hatch actually opens and the oxygen masks drop like they promised. I knew what came next. There'd be scrambling, backpedaling, pleading, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the mechanism I'd built was doing exactly what it was supposed to. No threats, no panic, just pressure on the right fault line, and it was cracking like clockwork. On a hunch, I reopened the board minutes, scanned the footnote again. Pending key person protections. Reviewed. That word, reviewed, meant someone acknowledged it. Legal had seen it, probably assumed it was boilerplate, definitely didn't understand they'd just fired a named person tied to the escrow schedule. The brilliance of it all was that they gave me the hammer. Caitlin delivered it with a smile. All I had to do was swing. Quietly, precisely. With every document dated, every receipt lined up like tombstones in a compliance cemetery. I watched the inbox ping again, escrow confirming receipt of the notice. Then another. Buyer's counsel opening the thread. The engine was starting to hum. I didn't need to press. Just wait. I put my phone away, adjusted my bag. The air was still artificial and fake sunny, like the world hadn't changed. But it had. They just didn't know it yet. There's a unique stillness that hits when the storm is already in motion, and you're the only one who hears it coming. Not because you're special, because you took notes. I wasn't racing, just sorting. As I sipped lukewarm coffee from the drive-thru down the road, I opened my laptop in the passenger seat and started dragging files into a clean trigger packet folder. It felt like setting a table for a dinner no one RSVP'd to, except the entrees were receipts and the wine was time-stamped humiliation. First, deliverables. 3 slide decks I authored for the pitch, each one watermarked, final signed by the exec sponsor, and saved in a read-only server directory. One of them included the financial waterfall I personally annotated, outlining operational risk buffers, the one they'd paraded in front of buyers without even stripping my initials from the footer. Classy. Next, email from the CEO dated 6 weeks back. Just one line, but it sang, "Love the diligence. A. Total belt and suspenders. Appreciate you going overboard." That was in response to the audit prep I flagged when I noticed 2 inconsistent vendor IDs on the cap table. He waved it off then. Now, that overboard diligence was going to buy me a private island. Then I exported the HRIS log. I wasn't supposed to have access, but a legacy admin account still floated in my profile, probably forgotten by whatever junior engineer was told to clean up dead permissions. Under personnel events, my record read auto terminate, status updated to inactive event reason, role elimination effective upon receipt. That was the sentence, that was the match. No grace period, no probation. Just clean, immediate severance triggered the moment Caitlin's voice said, "Today's your last day," and I clicked download PDF. Then the jewel of the whole packet, the LOI signature log, 9:12 a.m. Eastern, signed by both parties. Buyer's counsel, target counsel, and the 2 board observers on CC. Hard timestamp. Unambiguous. And then my termination timestamp, 10:03 a.m. That's 51 minutes later. You could land a jet between those 2 events. And that delta, that little sliver of arrogance and HR overconfidence, was worth $62 million. They'd lit the fuse and left the room. I wasn't running. I was narrating. I opened a new thread, subject line, continuity documentation packet for council reference only. I attached every file, the decks, the CEO quote, the HRIS export, the LOI log, no fire, no fury, just neutral, clinical, unshakable. I copied buyer's counsel again, not because I had to, but because the courtesy clause in my contract said I could. And that's the thing about contracts. If they say may, I do. Dear counsel, per prior notice and clause 19B enforcement, attached are relevant documents confirming active transaction participation, continuity acknowledgements, and timing of termination event relative to executed LOI. This is provided as a courtesy and for audit trail completeness. Best. A. Garrett, no threat, no heat, just quiet affirmation that everything was being logged, that I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't emotion, it was math. The best kind of revenge doesn't slam doors. It simply waits with a clipboard while the building collapses under its own negligence. Within 3 minutes, read receipts pinged. Buyers outside counsel. Internal legal. The escrow officer. One reply from the junior associate with a single word. Received. That's all I needed. Their silence would now do the heavy lifting. Because I hadn't accused anyone, I just offered facts. And the facts, all of them, pointed in one direction. They'd fired a key person without cause during a live transaction, with full documentation and acknowledgement. And the best part? I didn't even have to raise my voice. Their paperwork was doing all the shouting for me. The call came in while I was in the drive-thru again, this time for a sandwich I didn't even want. Habit, maybe, or nerves trying to find routine. I let it ring once before answering, then held the phone between shoulder and cheek while I waited on a sad, wilted tuna melt. A. Listen! The CEO's voice crackled through, fast and tense. Not the performative calm he used on all-hands calls. This one was raw. This was premature. We'll reverse it. You'll be reinstated, no harm, no foul. There it was. The pivot. The slow realization that someone had tugged a wire they didn't understand, and now the chandelier was falling in slow motion. I waited a beat, then replied, You can't reverse it. We can, A. It's HR protocol. Your letter, I interrupted, pulling the PDF up again, just to be petty, says effective upon receipt. That was 10:03, the timestamp, your delivery method, and the HRIS event log all align. It wasn't a threat. It was a trigger. You pulled it. He paused, then I heard it, legal whispering behind him. I imagined them huddled over a speakerphone, staring at an open version of my contract someone was finally reading for the first time in years. He tried again. There's flexibility here. I mean, obviously we didn't mean to jeopardize anything with the sale. And yet, I said, here we are. My tone wasn't smug. It was clinical. Tired, even. The kind of exhaustion that comes from spending years reminding people to read the fine print while they wave you off like a traffic cone. I didn't hate him, honestly. I pitied him. He'd spent so long living in the illusion of control he forgot paperwork has more authority than charm. I ended the call with a line I'd been saving. There's no undo button in contract law, only versions, and this one's already archived. Not 5 minutes later, the CFO chimed in, clearly not looped in on the CEO's damage control effort. He sent a clarification email meant to smooth things over, but instead cemented my case like concrete poured over regret. His exact words, just to clarify for all parties, the LOI was signed at 9:12 a.m. Eastern, and A's HR exit was completed at 10:03 a.m. I screenshotted the timestamp, saved it twice, forwarded it to my attorney with the subject, Gift from the Gods. Because there it was. Their own confirmation, no ambiguity, just a clean, dated chain of events. Signed transaction first, termination second. Clause 19B didn't just apply, it sang. Then came the echo effect. Buyer's counsel emailed the CEO directly. Short, curt. Given the update, we're pausing diligence until further internal review. Will advise. Translation. You just fired the linchpin we paid to keep, and now we're not sure if you're reckless or stupid, or both. The last email in that morning's cascade came from the insurer. Not dramatic, just cold inquiry, requesting a copy of the active contract schedule outlining Clause 19B and associated trigger mechanisms. Please respond by COB. That was the real storm. The insurer asking for proof meant they were now evaluating liability exposure, potentially millions in accelerated vesting, key person insurance fallout, maybe even a buyer penalty clause if due diligence fell through. All because Caitlin read a script, and no one read the clause. I sat in my car, sandwich untouched, phone face down, inbox still pinging. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired you cure with sleep, the kind you earn by warning people for years to read what they sign, only to watch them weaponize their ignorance against themselves. This wasn't revenge, it was math. And the math was flawless. By early afternoon, the spin cycle had begun. Corporate was scrambling like rats in a locked kitchen. Emails flagged urgent, subject lines with the word clarify, and HR trying to retroactively document decisions they didn't understand when they made them. I didn't reply to any of it, not yet. I had terms to draft. It wasn't petty, it was surgical. If I was going to walk away, clean, whole, unslandered, then I wasn't just going to let the parachute deploy. I was going to strap it down with iron buckles and make sure the wind didn't touch a hair on my team's heads either. I opened a new doc titled Terms, 19B Execution Package. No emotion, just bullet points. Payment of all earned and accrued bonuses for my direct reports. Named, line itemed, with quarterly performance confirmations. Signed, neutral to positive references for each of them, printed on letterhead and digitally time-stamped. Indemnification for any post-transaction media statements, including the standard carve-out for required disclosures, but no freelancing. Immediate processing of the 19B parachute payment, wiring instructions provided with same-day transfer confirmation by 4:00 p.m. And then came the spine, a non-disparagement carve-out that I inserted with surgical precision. In the event of regulatory, legal, or investigatory inquiries, this agreement shall not restrict my ability to provide factual accounts, including, but not limited to, events leading to and following termination. Translation: you lie, I speak. At 2:27 p.m., I sent it all in one neat, sealed PDF, labeled Executed Terms 19B, and dropped it into legal's inbox with the subject: Settlement Proposal, Effective Trigger Response. No cease, no grandstanding, just the paper, ready to do the talking. Caitlin tried, God bless her. She replied 22 minutes later, this time with a director looped in. Her email was one long paragraph of flailing HR speak. While we understand your concerns, please note that company policy requires... I stopped reading after policy. Instead, I pulled up the first page of my signed employment agreement, highlighted the opening line, and replied with, in the event of conflict between company policy and executed agreement, the agreement shall govern. See page 1, paragraph 2. Please review before responding further. Her read receipt popped within 30 seconds. She didn't reply. Smart. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was compliance cleanup, and I was already holding the mop. My attorney texted at 3:10. They're trying to loop in a mediator. I told them the clock's ticking. You gave them a deadline. Stick to it. I did. Because this wasn't about revenge, it was about language, precision, leverage, and the quiet satisfaction of watching people who ignored you for years now clinging to your every sentence like it might save them. By 4:00 p.m., the wire cleared. Full amount. Subject line, Execution 19B. I forwarded it to escrow for the record, then opened my calendar and accepted the 4:30 p.m. board invite. Emergency call. Attendees included CEO, CFO, General Counsel, Insurer Liaison, and Buyers Counsel. And me. Technically, I didn't plan to speak. I didn't have to. My job was done. Paperwork had spoken. All I had left to do was listen. The 4:30 board call opened with the usual cold static and too many titles jockeying for microphone space. The board chair's voice came through first, flat, measured, trying to project control he didn't have. Before we proceed, he said, we need to confirm, legally speaking, is Clause 19B enforceable as written? There was a pause just long enough to notice, then the insurer's liaison answered, calm, like a librarian explaining how overdue fines work. It was priced in. Standard key person rider. You terminated her inside the window, triggers valid, escrows acknowledged, funds disbursed, no ambiguity. Not arguably, not will see, just done, dusted, paid. My name sealed into a wire transfer that now lived in 2 regulatory audit trails and 1 high-anxiety investor packet. Then Buyers Counsel spoke. We'd also like to note that Ms. Garrett appears in our due diligence appendix under critical continuity personnel, page 14. Her role was flagged for risk exposure in case of departure. Silence. The kind of silence that weighs more than shouting. I imagined them all blinking, some shifting in their seats, some finally flipping to page 14 to see the highlight they'd skipped when they skimmed my name. No one had ever said it out loud before. I wasn't an extra. I was infrastructure. Then HR tried. Predictably. Well, Caitlin's boss started, her voice tight. There had been ongoing concerns around performance we've been monitoring. Is there a formal record of that? The company's outside counsel asked without inflection. A shuffle. Someone unmuted, then muted again. Then, no, nothing written. I didn't smile. Not even to myself. There was nothing left to gloat over. This wasn't a victory dance. This was documentation doing what it was born to do. Reveal wrought in fluorescent clarity. Buyer's counsel again. So, to clarify, you terminated a named critical continuity employee with no cause during an active diligence window, despite their involvement in operational documentation. The CEO mumbled something about miscommunication. The CFO tried restructure. The insurer cut them both off. None of that negates Clause 19B, which you all signed. Another beat of silence. Then the chair again. What options remain? That's when the desperation bloomed. We'd like to propose temporary reinstatement, legal offered, just to stabilize the transaction optics. I leaned back in my chair at home, watching the transcript stream across the screen like subtitles to a show they no longer directed. I let it breathe, let them stew in the suggestion, and then I unmuted. No. The single word landed like a gavel. The clause doesn't do temporary, I continued. It executes upon termination, not optional, not reversible. This isn't a parking ticket, it's a mechanism. They started to reply, but I cut the mic again, let the silence speak louder than anything else I could say. They knew. Everyone on that call finally knew. They'd yanked the cord thinking it was a light switch, and it was really the trigger on a perfectly legal, perfectly lethal device they built and forgot about. The board secretary eventually called for adjournment. The meeting ended without ceremony. But in that vacuum, the hierarchy reset itself. They might still hold titles, but I held precedent. The wire confirmation came through just after dawn. Subject line, executed transfer, 19B. No emoji, no exclamation marks. Just 6 zeros, 3 commas, and a little note in the corner. Processed per trigger terms. I stared at it for a long moment, not for the money. Hell, I'd earned every cent over the years they forgot I existed. But for the weight behind it. You don't write checks that size unless you've already bled in the boardroom. They had. The bruises were quiet, but real. The mutual release arrived 10 minutes later, redlined, edited, and, surprise, fully accepted with my language intact. They didn't even push back on the carve-out this time. I'd been clear. If they lie, I speak. If they frame this as anything less than a lawful, contractual event, I have receipts ready and labeled. All they had to do was shut up, pay up, and walk away, in silence. Then came the olive branch. They tried to slide it in as if I wouldn't notice. A separate note from the CEO himself, less formal, more desperate. We'd like to extend a continued relationship, strategic advisory role, generous retainer. You know this place better than anyone. I replied once. I don't advise arsonists on fire exits. No signature, no warmth, just the truth. But I wasn't done. Not until the people who kept that place standing got their own parachutes. I scheduled a short call with HR. No small talk, no easing in. I want formal references for my team, neutral positive, signed, on letterhead, digital and physical. You'll use the wording I provide, no edits. Caitlin stammered something about process. Contract trumps process, I replied. Again. And the bonuses? She asked, like maybe I'd forgotten. No, I said. They didn't forget to deliver. You don't get to forget to pay. By noon, both were signed and countersigned. I forwarded everything to my team, not with flourish, just with a subject line that said, "Keep this, always." One of them replied with a string of crying emojis and a heart, another with a gif of someone saluting. I let them have their reactions. I was just glad I could hand them something clean when the system tried to bury them under budget adjustments. I poured a black coffee, no sugar, sat by the window. The sky was pale and uncaring. Outside, nothing had changed. But everything had. Not because I screamed, not because I fought, but because I filed. Because I labeled. Because while everyone else was trying to win by volume, I was winning by version control. Late that evening, a new email arrived from the buyer's head of strategy. Subject line: Thursday market update. Listener invite. There was no request to speak, just an invitation to hear how the story ends. I clicked accept. Just once. Let them tell it. Let them spin the cleanup however they need. I'll be listening, with the contract still open and the clause still undefeated. The buyer's update hit the wires by 10:06 a.m., and by 10:10 the Slack channels at my old company were lit like a Christmas tree at a house fire. One sentence delivered with surgical calm. Due to recent governance concerns, we are temporarily pausing diligence until internal alignment is reestablished. Governance. Not strategy, not numbers. Governance. The quiet dagger word that means you broke something structural, and now we're checking if your foundation even exists. The investor blogs jumped immediately. Key contributor became the phrase du jour, and a few niche analysts even linked to my archived public presentations. They were polite enough not to name me, but the time-stamped LOI and the timeline did all the talking. The subtraction was loud. Inside the company, the bloodletting was quick. The board chair, someone I always suspected still printed his emails, stared down the CEO on a live internal call. Explain the 62 million, he said, voice sharp as gravel. The CEO tried. It was a but the word miscommunication didn't survive his mouth. It collapsed on impact. There was no miscommunication. There was only negligence, signed in blue ink, countersigned by arrogance, and executed by a junior in a blazer who was coached to smile while holding a loaded gun. The next SEC filing removed the CEO by name. Caitlin's profile disappeared from the HR team page that afternoon. No farewell posts. Just gone. Diligence resumed 2 days later with a modified scope. My name wasn't in it, which was the entire point. I was no longer their asset. I was the line item they had to explain. My team's bonuses hit by Friday, full amounts. One of them sent me a screenshot of the deposit with the message, "Did you rob a bank for us?" I told him no. I just read the ledger while everyone else was posting motivational quotes. Then, finally, I went back. Just for a moment, I parked where Caitlin had made me walk out. The same lot, the same sky, filtered through the same dead pine trees corporate had planted for aesthetics. The same beige box of a building where people once forgot I existed unless something broke. I went in under guest clearance, past the lobby desk without a glance, and walked to the security return window. The same one where they'd asked for my badge like it was a parking pass. I handed over nothing. I just stood there and pointed to the cardboard box I'd left behind, the one Caitlin had brought in for me all those lifetimes ago. Inside were a few dry pens, an old mouse pad, one cracked mug with a fading team photo on it. Nothing anyone would miss. Nothing of value unless you knew what else had been inside the day I left. Now, it was heavier. Not with paper. Just a number I'd never say out loud. I carried it out quietly. No photos, no speeches, no last looks. Just clean lines, settled books, and one simple truth. They call it a golden parachute like I fell. I didn't. I folded it myself, labeled every strap, and pulled the cord when they shoved. Paperwork isn't dramatic. It's just undefeated.